Okay, so we've talked about the classes, but let's pull back a little bit. Skitch, can you give us kind of an overview of the game, and especially the powers, and maybe also how it works in relation to the idea that, yeah, this is, at least in theory, a Dungeons & Dragons game?
Right. Well, this game was in spirit meant to be derived from 4th edition Dungeons and Dragons, and there are actually a number. In fact, I would say the majority of major mechanical points features a lot of deviations from 4th edition, but that's because this is an acted MMO, not a turn-based, grid-based game like 4th edition is. However, there are a couple of key areas where there is some overlap design-wise. You notice that kind of in the organization of powers as a general concept and how it relates to the classes. So regardless of the class you play as, one of the things this game doesn't have is a long hotkey bar that you have to manage, like DDO or World of Warcraft. You have like rows after rows of powers to cycle through. You have a very constrained list of powers, and it breaks down in the following manner. You have at-will powers that you can use at any time in your mouse, left and right click. You have on Q, E, and R, encounter powers, which are powers that are slightly more powerful, give certain buffs or benefits, but have a short time-based cooldown. And then you have your daily powers, I'll put those in quotes, that you trigger when you build up enough action points. You begin the game with the ability to slot one daily power at a time, and partway through, I think by level 20 or a little bit earlier than that, you gain the ability to slot 2 daily powers at a time. So it models 4th edition in that you have basically a relatively specific list of powers you have available at any time, and they have different rates at which they can be used, and they're all stylized around each class. There's no such thing as just a basic regular attack for any class. Everyone has an at-will power that is keyed to their class and how they operate.
Yeah, and the terminology really doesn't end there. Armor class, even though it's not actually armor class, so D&D geeks out there, we all know what armor class is. It's how hard you are to hit. But here in this game, it's not how hard you are to hit, it's how well you take a hit. And there's all sorts of terminology like that. If you're a D&D geek and you walk into this, so long as you have a general mind frame, you'll be able to figure out what all of these terms do.
Right. Don't get too hung up on some of the semantics like I did early on. Like, don't get too hyper-focused about the fact that the Guardian fighter's primary stat is Constitution and not Strength, because the amount of damage they do for their powers isn't as much keyed off of Strength as you think it is. And I think that's a design choice that allows for players to be more open with their choices of races and classes. So you don't have to be the optimal race for the optimal class for the optimal purpose and still be functional.
Real quick, what are the current selectable races?
The current selectable races are human, half-elf, elf, tiefling, halfling, dwarf.
And tiefling, for those who don't know, explain that real quick.
The tiefling, at least in the 4th edition context, are the descendants of a group of humans who made deals with, I believe, demons. I don't know whether they're from the abyssal plane or otherwise. And then the tieflings in the current setup are basically descendants from those people from long ago that made those deals with demons. And if I'm wrong, feel free to call me out in the comments.
Practical terms of the game, it basically means you're the badass-looking red guy with horns and a tail.
Basically, here's the thing. DDO was a much closer attempt, at least on the surface, of trying to model what 3rd edition D&D was. You had ability scores, you had point buy in the way it did, you had feats, you had skills, you had all those sort of things lined up. A lot of departures from the core 4th edition rules were taken in this game because it's very clear that the developers wanted to make an action MMO first, not an accurate representation of 4th edition at the expense of a fun action MMO, I guess is the way to say it.
Yeah, and if anything, this is action MMO. This is Guild Wars 2, this is Terra Online, This is everything that you know about action games. For as bad as this sounds, it is the next game in the recent wave of action MMOs.
Sure. And I think that there are going to be some points that some people may be upset about with that one way or another. But again, we're still in beta. There's still some details that are going to be fleshed out. The one thing that I thought was particularly striking about this from an implementation standpoint, I think is kind of neat about the team play. Skills in this game are very different than DDO and D&D. The idea is that each class has a class skill, either in the list of Dungeoneering, Arcana, Nature, Religion, or Thievery. And then basically there will be either environmental items or potentially, as I saw in some Foundry stuff, dialogue options that are constrained based on what skill you have access to.
And in a nice little touch, you can temporarily gain these skills for like 3 minutes at a time through a variety of potions or what have you that you'll either find or in some cases you can purchase.
And I do have to interject with that. I found a very in-joke item, the 10-foot pole.
Yes.
That gives you Dungeoneering. I stopped. I had to laugh. It was amazing.
That's a great point because, yeah, this game does not take itself too seriously. It definitely has a sense of humor at times.
Oh, geez. The Rare Merchant?
Yeah.
Oh, God, yes.
Yeah.
We got to tell the story. Basically, we're in the middle of a quest line. It's the big quest line we were talking about earlier. We're in a part of the city where shit has gone down. Let's just say that. And we're down in the sewers because, you know, in the end, it all comes down to the sewers.
Well, we were escaping the bad shit. We were escaping. Yes. We were running away.
Right. We were trying to get to the area where we can stop all the bad shit. And along the way, we're having to fight this army of were-rats. And at one point, and it's this optional path, up at the top is this merchant. And he's a were-rat. And you can talk to him and he goes, well, this is awkward. And then he'll say, why don't we just pretend you're a normal client, I'm a normal merchant, and just go about our business. But if you ask him why he's not trying to kill you, he'll basically say, I just watched you slaughter all my friends. Honestly, I don't want to die.
I'm a notorious coward.
The notorious coward line was what made me laugh, just because, especially with some of my games recently, I have DMs who would have a character who would just say, I won't fight you because I'm famed for my cowardice. I will say one thing I wish this game had in that regard, I wish there was actually some sort of Dungeon Master style narrated thing like they had in DDO. That would be great.
There is voice acting, though in the beta, not all the voice acting have been implemented, and even what voice acting there was, oftentimes it was pretty clear they were temp tracks. I'm the story guy. I'm the one who blathers on about story until people want to just stab me with a knife repeatedly. So I have to comment that as a game that's telling a story, Neverwinter is not as intensive as, say, something like Guild Wars 2 or Old Republic, but it does put more effort into telling a story than just your standard, here's a bag of tech. I mean, there is some attempt. And also, I noticed as you go along, as the quests get bigger, you start to get more and more cutscenes and things become more dramatic. So it could also just be they're trying to build, although I don't know how much of a favor. I mean, again, it's beta. There's clearly some attempt at story. There's going to be voice acting. So it's not just go out and kill things. There is context.
Now, speaking about the quests and how they're sort of set up, Oda, I mean, you're more of an MMO guy, so you can kind of express some of the intricacies of how this relates to the modern trend of MMOs in terms of things like instancing the world in general and otherwise. So
yeah, absolutely. For one, I would have to equate the style of questing and kind of storytelling in this game much like KOTOR. You know, in Star Wars The Old Republic, basically, if you were walking around the world, you had some quests here, quests there, go here, fetch this, do that, pick this up, you know, whatever. And then you got an important quest where you had to deal with like a specific NPC you had to kill or something like that. And then you have to go through a door, and boom, you're in an instance. Yes, you can take your party with you, but boom, you're in an instance by yourself, and that's where they can actually tell a story. Now, that's when you get dialogue. Otherwise, you're just walking around the world. You know, you're not doing much, and so now you're in an instance. You can have storytelling, there's lots of items, you can do all of that. And you get to the end, there's a chest, there's your loot, here you go, and you're on your way. And then the game does progress in these instances very, very quickly, very linearly, but you've got traps, you've got, oh, here's a skull on the wall that says, oh, I need Dungeonary to use this. Well, I'm a fighter. Oh, pull on the skull, boom, wall opens up. You're like, oh, crap, an area just for me because I'm a fighter, oh.
And you'll encounter some puzzles. I mean, most of the ones I saw at least were fairly basic, but there was attempts to do more than just kill enemies.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, indeed there was, and that's very appreciative. The big story missions, you know, the ones that take like half hour, 45 minutes to do, unless, of course, Skitch's Rogue is with you, in which case it's like 5 minutes, but, you know, whatever. But those kind of missions, they did such a good job of doing them, and I remember, like I said, when I hit level 17 and we hit that quest line, the Spell Plague quest line, and then it kind of got to the end and you're like, this is just like a D&D session. Like, something minor happened, you went and investigated it, got back to town, and you found out, oh, maybe I shouldn't have done that. Oh, crap, something's going to hell. Oh, crap, run. All right, let's group up. All right, let's go. Let's solve the problem and kill the bad guy who betrayed us in the beginning. Boom. All right, guys, here's your experience. Take your garbage out on the way out and thank my mom for making the pizza pockets.
Right, exactly. Boom. It's one of the strengths in terms of the quest design. You have these sort of filler, either fetch quests or enemy quests or otherwise, where you're either learning about the different enemy styles or the different attack styles because since this is an action game, all the attacks are telegraphed, so you have a chance to avoid them if you know how to read the telegraphs. But then you get to, like you said, the story missions, and then it feels like sort of a more traditional, prototypical D&D storytelling arc, where you begin with a small curiosity that escalates into a grand encounter.
Speaking of storytelling, one area where the game has a lot of potential for storytelling is the Foundry. And we mentioned the Foundry before. We talked a little bit about it, but let's talk specifically about it. What were your impressions of the Foundry after messing around with some of the missions from it? Do you see, and obviously, it's hard to make a final pronouncement, but do you see potential there?
I see potential in the following manner. One of the things I saw in one of the Foundry missions was really particularly interesting was people who would make dialogue situations where some of the dialogue choices were blocked off if you didn't have access to a particular skill, which I thought was kind of a neat little design choice. But there's also a decent amount of leverage in terms of the way the environments looked, the way that you can progress, the way that you can actually make a campaign with multiple missions throughout that you can actually go through in order like those main story missions. So in terms of the scale of it, though, I'm not quite sure how big the scale will be, but it seems like there is potential depending on how much they will allow in the tool sets.
There is some vast possibilities, and I am thankful, and this is something we did not mention, but there are taverns scattered around the world. In most zones, you can find a tavern. Yes. If you go in that tavern, there will be NPCs, typically a bartender or a barmaid, and if you talk to them, they will give you a quest and port you to do a Foundry mission that is set in that area.
Right.
So, in a way, they have integrated player-created content into the actual gameplay experience. You don't have to, like in City of Heroes, go to a specific building somewhere.
One thing I do think is also kind of neat that they did in that regard, if you wanted to just go straight into a Foundry mission, you can hit L on the keyboard, pull up a window, that's the main menu, just pick a Foundry mission to do, and just say, I want to do this Foundry mission now, and go off that way too. But I think it's also nice that they have that sort of cohesion of, oh, you're in this area. Well, here's the missions that are built in this area that are sort of stacked on top of what you're doing right now.
And you can read up on the missions too, like you can see how dialogue heavy, how combat heavy, and that alone, it even looks like you might be able to make, without having actually seen the tool set, it looks like to me you could even make missions that are entirely dialogue-driven or just role-playing driven.
One of the things I would like to see someone make, and I was reminded of a mission, I think, in Neverwinter Nights, where there was more or less an investigation, and part of it was trying to figure out who was responsible for a particular crime. And I feel that for this type of model, you could make missions like that, like investigation missions and stuff, because you could have types of clues that only certain skills can find, and then you have different sort of ways to work with it. So it could be interesting how that works out.
I think it's very appropriate because what I remember more than anything from Neverwinter Nights were the user tools that they shipped. That was the game that really showed me the first time the possibility of what happens when you open up tool sets to people. And I think it's very appropriate that this unofficial heir to that game is also continuing that tradition. All right, let's say that, the people at Cryptic are listening to this. Any suggestions, any more than anything, want to see changed or improved, or what do you want to see?
For me, I want to kind of see what some of the other class options are, and more importantly, see if they will allow for a more advanced class building option in the game. What they're doing right now is similar to what DDO does in regards to you pick a class, you pick an archetype of that class, and then it does a lot of the hard decision making for you as you level up, and then you can just make some simple enhancements as you go. I'd like to see the option of having more control over the ability score layout, and possibly even ways to pick out the order that I get certain powers in, or otherwise see what can be possible there without it being terribly broken. The other small thing, just because in 4th edition, I absolutely love the Bard class. I want to see a Bard class, and I think a beautiful one would be taking the Valorous Bard, the melee-focused Bard that grants temporary hit points like a beast, and then lords up over everyone else with his ability to use skills. And that would make me very happy.
How about you, Odo?
Right now, I think this game is at a fair point, and I think right now they need to focus on the small things. I think their models are great. I think the graphics are great, especially for a free-to-play. And I think where they're going with storytelling is great, but it needs some polish. And I can't say this without spoiling things, so I'll do it generally, but let's just say you reach the final climax of the act. You meet face-to-face the big evil bad guy, or woman as the case may be. And, okay, we all know that you're like halfway to level cap. You're not facing down the final boss of the game, but the boss is standing right there. And then just without saying anything, just snaps her fingers and just leaves. No dialogue, no taunting, no. And it's just something like, oh, so everything I just did the 2 hours I spent going through the puzzle rooms, doing this, and here's kind of the reward, meeting the bad guy, and then no exchange, no dialogue, no nothing, and then just poof, suddenly gone, and then without any explanation, I get a quest to go kill X named person to escape the dungeon. And you're like, but why do I have to escape? Can't I just go back that way? Like, there's nothing trapping me here. Some storytelling polish, and I also want to reiterate Skitch's point, except I want to say, here's your opportunity to make money. Have, much like Champions Online did, have these characters that we have access to now and when you come out with like the Great Weapon Fighter and all that, have them as the archetypes, but let people who want to pay, either subscribe or blah, 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 or pay a fee or whatever, let us build our archetype by, I want to be a fighter.
Right, yeah, exactly.
Don't cue us into, I'm a shield fighter, I'm a this fighter. I'm going to pick a fighter, and then let us pick our powers, and let us slot things in different orders, but scale things on a level basis so the damage isn't overpowered, because we're all going to hit level cap sometime.
Right, but basically model it a little bit more like how you would build that type of character in 4th edition itself, where you begin with the general class, then focus on the archetype.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, again, to make it an option, don't change what they have now, because the archetype system is good, especially for newcomers. But for advanced players, big D&D fans, or people who just want to pay for it, why not?
Yeah.
What about you, Shaun?
Like I said, I'm a story guy, so I'd like a little more story. I understand that 4th edition was basically very combat-driven, and that was the whole focus more. But, I'd like to see something that, for instance, Old Republic, opportunities to actually roleplay and to build a personality. And right now, what story is in the game is all story about the world and about other characters. But there's really you have these background elements you can select, your origin and your god of choice, and a few little touches, and they deliberately say they have no actual impact on the game. I'd like to see them play that up. I'd like it to have impact, and I'd like them to let me establish personality a little bit there. Because you have these dialogue options that close out when you're talking to people, but there's not a choice. It's always the same. So I'd like to, maybe I say something smart-ass, maybe I don't. I think that would be imminently doable. Oh, this is a purely mechanical change. For large portions of the game, you're in Neverwinter, especially early on, but you have safe areas and you have areas that are dangerous. Right now, there's no fast travel, there's no way to warp, there's none of that, and because there's lots of just random mobs running around, and because they regenerate fairly quickly, you end up getting slowed down, and most of the time they're no threat, but you still have to stop and deal with them. Definitely please implement some sort of warp back to base or fast travel system. The game really needs that.
I will absolutely echo that as well. I totally spaced on that after I got my mount, but yeah.
And you don't get your mount till like 20.
Yeah, you don't get your mount till 20, and you don't get your companion until like 16.
Oh, we didn't talk about companions.
They're a lot like SWTOR companions. You have them, they help you, they're the archetypes. Yeah, they level up and things like that. There's not a lot to cover on them, but
they're basically one more sign that the game is very much playable by yourself.
Yeah, you can totally solo with it. I know as soon as I got my cleric companion, I was like unstoppable, because that's when I hit like level 17 and suddenly, things changed. But to go where were you going? As soon as I got my mount, things kind of opened up. I traveled fast, but even after a while, there are some areas in the later levels where you're like, crap, I gotta ride through all of that?
It's a little thing that can really add up. All right, I think the best way to sum this up is, going forward, can you see yourself continuing to play this game? How about you, Oda?
Absolutely. I can tell you that I will play this game.
I will play Neverwinter when it comes out, and I'll hopefully play more of it during the beta phase. And again, I'm just sort of hoping that certain classes and certain flavor elements that I like mechanically from 4th edition show up in there. And
yeah.
As for whether or not I'm going to keep playing, that's difficult for me to say, and I don't do well with commitment. But no, in cases like these, I'm not good at committing myself wholly, because I like to play different games. I always like to see something new. I could definitely see myself, though, returning to this game at times. And what's nice is it's a game that very much leaves itself open for pick up and play. At least right now, because it's very soloable, I can very easily picture myself maybe playing a couple hours every week or every couple weeks, and then putting it down and doing other things. Or whenever I have some free time, I'll go check up what's with Neverwinter. It's a game that it impressed me. It was a game I went into that I wasn't convinced I'd ever really want to play long term, and now I'm open to the possibility. And in a lot of ways, that's an impressive change of position for me.
Mm-hmm. I've actually had a few people who I've talked to who have played 4th edition quite a bit and were initially writing off Neverwinter. And then when I started explaining the mechanics and, again, explaining why the changes were the way they were, a lot of them actually responded very positively, saying, good. It's good that they're not just trying to make it D&D for the sake of D&D, but they're trying to make it like a decent action MMO first. And that really, I think, is pointing that Cryptic is, in general, doing the right direction with the game.
And as much as this is a beta, and there's lots of little areas here and there, but overall, there's a real sense of polish and assurance to this game. This is a game for people who know what they're doing, and I would say more than anything, do not write this game off. Give it a shot when it hits. I'm going to have links down at the bottom of the page where you can sign up for a chance to enter the beta. You have to spend at least $60 to get guaranteed entry, and I can understand if you're on the fence to be reluctant about that, but at the very least, try and sign up for the beta. There will be at least 2 more beta weekends. Next beta weekend will be March 8th through March 10th, and then the third one will be March 22nd through March 24th, and we will have access to those betas as well. So I don't know if we're going to do a full-on roundtable like this, but I think at the very least, we'll give updated impressions as it warrants. But yeah, more than anything, I hope people give this game a chance. I think going free to play with this game is absolutely the right idea. This is the perfect game to benefit from the free to play model. And originally it wasn't going to be free to play, and I'm glad they avoided that mistake. Even buy to play, I think, would have been the wrong way. This is a perfect game to use that model with, I think. Been watching our footage this whole time. It looks interesting. Keep an eye open. Give it a shot. Leave your preconceptions at the door. I think this game may surprise you. So, yeah, that is it from us here at BT. Thanks for listening to the Roundtable. Thanks to the people at Perfect World and Cryptic for giving us the opportunity to both play their game and talk about it endlessly. Definitely try the game out. This is Shaun Cronenfeld for Blistered Thumbs, wishing you all a good time.